Um, a couple of weeks ago, we had Regina on talking us through looking after our own mental health. What I'm going to talk about is how, as leaders and managers and as organisations, we can support the mental health and the stress levels of our employees. And what I see a reasonable amount of in organisations is initiatives like yoga and walking clubs and running clubs, and there was even a sea shanties one in one organisation. So all sorts of stuff, and that's good and it's fine, but it very much depends on the employees joining in and taking the time really to do their thing. So it's very reliant on them. And I have this idea that, if you're feeling stressed and overworked, are you likely to take time out of your day to go and, for example, sing sea shanties? Even though it might do us the world of good, my fear is it's not going to happen. Another potential issue, I think, is that we often offer support as a reaction to stress. That is, we see someone getting stressed and having problems, and then we do something to help them. Now, I'm not saying don't do that, incidentally. I don't want people saying, I went to the most extraordinary talk this morning. An HR person said, don't help people who are stressed. Do. But my contention is that actually we are too dependent on individuals managing their own stress levels, albeit with some support, and that a lot of what we do is reactive and therefore, to be honest, a little bit too late. So that's all fine and good, I would hear you say if you weren't on mute. But what are we supposed to do about that? Well, I'm glad you asked me that, thank you, because it leads me on to the next thing that I wanted to do. So let's just take a moment out and watch some rugby, shall we? I'm going to show you a clip from a 1973 match between the Barbarians and the All Blacks. The Barbarians are the stripy guys, the All Blacks are the ones in all black. You'll be unsurprised to hear. I'm not going to worry about sharing the sound from it at the moment. I just want us to watch this. So, where's it? Right. And there goes Gareth Edwards, rampaging through to score. Wonderful try. Again, all fine and good. You're probably wondering why I took a few minutes to show you that, though. Well, what can we possibly learn from that clip in terms of supporting stress? Well, if you're playing rugby, or indeed any sport, but I think rugby is a particularly strong analogy for it, there is utterly no point waiting until 8 big blokes have jumped on top of someone and are ripping the ball out of his hand before you go and help them out. That tries a particularly strong example. Every time a Barbarians player has the ball, there are at least 4 or 5 players gathered around, giving him options, ready to support. Might not get used, but nonetheless, they're all there to support each other. So the manager has arranged the plan and the tactics in advance. It was at Twicker's, Jamie, yes. So, what a try to have seen. Many say the greatest ever scored. So what you've got there is a team where everyone knows how their job relates to the wider goal, but, and this is the critical part, people switch and share jobs as is required. How often does this happen in workplaces? Probably not that much. The only time I can think where it does potentially sometimes, if we think about project management for a moment, just by a little share of hands up or smiley faces or whatever little icon thing you want to share. Has anyone had any formal project management training? Guy has. Lorna has. John has. Fabulous. Those who haven't, if you want any, let me know. The role of the project manager is to make sure everyone knows what needs to be done by whom, when, but we don't really use that approach in business as usual. I just wonder why not. Because actually, if we had things like a clear set of plans, and everyone knew who had ownership of them, everyone knew when things were due, then you have the ability, sorry, I hit the wrong button, you have the ability, and I hit it again, to help one another out in a far more proactive manner. Let's bring up a few slides now. Oh, the computer's in a funny mood. There it goes. So, what do we need to do to make this happen? Let's just get past that title slide. There we go. So actually, if as leaders we have a very clear set of plans, which are shared with one another, and the team has an awareness of what everybody is doing and how they all contribute to what we're doing and what deadlines they all have, then the team has the ability to help one another out in a way that a lot of business as usual teams don't do. If as a leader I have the oversight of when the stress points are, then I can step in and I can start to do something about it. Effective communication, very, very important in this. Everybody needs to know and understand what's going on, what everybody's working on, what the deadlines are, what the priorities are, so that we can move and help one another. So as a team member, I don't have to be the leader, but if I'm aware who in my team has stress points coming up, then I can be ready, as with the rugby clip, to step in and help them. And I can do that proactively rather than wait until they're about to have a breakdown and then taking some work off them, which is probably by then late and not in the state we want it to be, creating more stress. Provided everybody has a fair and reasonable workload, and this is a particularly pertinent one, I think, at the moment, where we've seen companies over furlough staff and then dump massive workloads on the people who are still working. We're not seeing fair and reasonable workload, so we're seeing stress levels go up. It can be useful for all staff to go through some stress identification and management training so they can spot when they're getting stressed at early stages, and they can also hopefully spot when their colleagues are and step in and help them. It's very important as leaders that we're the ones calling out and resolving conflict. Conflict, major source of stress. If we're aware it's there, we have a duty to call it out and to get something done about it so that people can move on. And I think it's really important as leaders that we open up about our mental health, that we feel confident enough to talk about it and to make it okay to talk about. In some organisations, and particularly in some sectors, talking about mental health is still considered to be a bit construction. It's very macho environments. People don't really talk about mental health still. So some things there that we can really do. And there's some practical tips for managers. And this is, I assume, a particularly timely thing. CIPD sent out some stuff around this yesterday. So there's some actual practical things we can take some time out to do as leaders as well. And the first is to get to know your team better. Get a bit of time knowing who they are, what their family situation is, how they like to work, all this sort of stuff. That'll just be useful in terms of, again, allowing you to be proactive in managing the way that their stress levels might be affected by things. Promote healthy working habits by showing them yourself. If you don't want people overworking, don't overwork yourself. If you don't want a culture where emails get sent at any time of any day, don't do it. So model healthy working habits. Take some time to go through and review everybody's workload. Have a check on what duties everybody's doing. See where there's the opportunity for people to share things, share responsibilities. It's worth reflecting on your management style as well. Are you the person who causes most of the stress in your team? You might well be. It's worth thinking about, it's worth reflecting on. And again, how do you go about leading? Do you always do the same thing? Are you a highly directive leader? And actually, that can be very stressful for some people. Or are you one of those super supportive leaders who will support but never actually tell anybody what it is you want them to do? Again, this can create levels of stress. I think it's very important, particularly at the moment, that we discourage presenteeism. 10, 20 years ago, everyone got obsessed with absenteeism and trying to stamp down on those one-day absences that cost companies a fortune. Um, I was supporting a contact centre at one point, and they got very concerned about one-day absences, and they were concerned that was people taking the mickey. So they decided to really clamp down on that. What do you think happened? A massive rise in 3, 4 to 5 day absences. Because all the people who are going to take one day off thought, well, I won't take 2 days off because that looks suspicious. But if I take 3 or 4 days off, they'll never think it was just a hangover on day one. So for the sake of losing someone for a couple of hours because they'd overslept, we were losing them for the best part of a week. At the moment, you have this problem of presenteeism where people are dragging themselves into work no matter how they're feeling because they know that absenteeism is frowned upon and it's not helping. And the other thing we can do is to proactively manage mental health, which brings me back to what I was talking about. Let's be really stop reacting and start being proactive in this. Make it a part of your plan. How do I manage the mental health of my team? How am I going to make sure that everybody's okay? How am I going to check that everybody's okay? And how am I going to help to make my team partly responsible for looking after each other within this? This is particularly important at the moment when we're managing virtually. I can't see body language. I can't see people all the time. So it's really important that I'm communicating regularly but not excessively, and that I'm listening out really critically for what's not being said. People may not tell me how they're feeling, so I'm going to have to listen that much more carefully and try and spot what's going on between the lines. I'm going to have to try and spot behaviours. Do I start to see people working an excessive amount of hours? Am I starting to see people just radio silence for days at a time? Am I starting to see workloads, deadlines be missed? Things like this. So all of those little signs that might point to the fact that there are mental health issues going on. But again, if I'm really carefully monitoring what's your workload like, what's your home situation like, and staying on top of that, hopefully I can stop people getting into that stressful situation in the first place. And that's really the big sort of message that I wanted to try and get across today. I'm aware I must be pretty nearly out of time now, so I'll just wrap up by saying that if anybody wants to talk further about this, they're my details. I know some of you have got them already. Feel free, please, to just drop me a note and we'll jump on Zoom and we'll just have a chat. And that's basically